Guys, just from my side, a massive welcome. I think it's so good to see a lot of familiar faces, and I really want to encourage a bit of interaction. I'm going to give a shout out to one or two guys that I've just noticed there on the right-hand side. Hamlet, firstly to you. I hope you and little Arthur are well. I can see you guys standing there. Good to see you guys. Barry and the Scottish Network, great to see all of you. Daniel, I don't think it's your under your name, but it's definitely you I saw. And then Mr. Paul van Meekeren, I'm going to give a shout out to you because I saw a fantastic story about you, and I want to actually even just speak about it just before we get going. There's this story that everybody, there are a lot of guys that have really been struggling during lockdown. And Paul, you were even delivering Uber Eats at one stage. And I think to keep your career going, just a massive shout out to you, and good to see you, my bud. But I promise you, I'm not going to be giving away many of the Scottish national secrets away. But very, very well done for coming on and trying to get the little bits that you can. But I kind of see this as a batting order. So we allowed Mikey to go up front and play sort of a swashbuckling knock. I'm coming into the middle order, hopefully to stabilize things. And I know I've got my mates on the other side and my co-pilot, Mr. JP Duminy, here on the other side, just to come in. And I don't want to discredit him by saying a cameo innings. I know he's going to come in and play that match-winning innings that we all expect from him.
Impact player.
Impact player. So without further ado, James, it's good to see you. I'm going to throw the first question at you. Speak to me about your I mean, it might feel like quite a long time ago already, but your retirement out of the game and just what that transition has looked like for you.
Yeah, before I answer that, Shane, let me also just welcome everyone from my side. And obviously had the introduction from Mike, but there was a little bit of distortness there. So firstly, just thank you to everyone. Thank you for signing up. I know it's going to be an exciting few days of not only sharing knowledge, but sharing in conversation. I think that's the important thing. For me, it's not about me telling you how things are done. I think it's an opportunity for all of us to learn and continue to learn. But for myself and Shane, it's in conversation and preparation for this, it has been mainly about sharing experiences and sharing stories. So a lot of that will come through, as you will see throughout these webinars. So I'm pretty excited about that. Just regarding the transition, it's been interesting. You made mention there that it seems like it's been a long time. It's been over a year now, and there's definitely been some challenging moments in trying to really discover and find what's next, but also, where the passion lies and how do you fulfill that passion and purpose in one's life, particularly when you've walked the journey of a career of 20 years in playing cricket. It's always a tough transition, finding purpose. And commentary has been something that has been enjoyable, and I found purpose in it, in having a voice in the game and sharing my experiences and stories, and hopefully that transition will continue within that space. But again, another passion is coaching, and I'm very much a novice in it, and that's the beauty of this conversation. It's like I said, it's not about me just telling you what to do or how you do things. It's sharing experiences and stories. So hopefully we'll get some stories out of you guys as well, and experiences, and we will take this learning process forward. So yeah, thanks again.
Absolutely. Thanks, James. I mean, you kind of alluded to my next question I was going to ask you. I was going to ask you about the commentary, and I think, certainly from my side, and the feedback is you've done a fantastic job. Everybody enjoys listening to you, and I think the knowledge and the input that you give is very invaluable. It's good that you've also found an outlet, maybe not just the commentary, but the coaching. And I think a lot of players struggle with that transition from playing to retiring. So it seems like you've done it really well, and great that you're still involved in the game.
Thank you.
I think, look, guys, let's be very.
Look forward to it.
I would like to just, before we get into the nuts and bolts of performance planning, I want to just make special mention to probably what a tough time we're all going through at the moment with the COVID-19 virus. And I just think how lucky we are to be able to share our knowledge over a platform like this. And I really want to encourage people to interact, especially through the chat box. Ask as many questions as you want to. There'll be an opportunity at the end where JP and I will answer your questions. But, I've been in the game. I was thinking about it a little bit earlier, for 20 years now. And it's incredible to think how long I've been involved in the game. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm going to have all the answers, and that certainly doesn't mean that JP is going to have all the answers. But I'm hoping that we can provide you all with enough information and enough stories that that can hopefully help your coaching career or whatever other journey you might take within the game, because it's not always about playing and coaching. Maybe some of you are involved in the game in different areas. So without further ado, I think we need to get started. Topic for today is performance planning, and I'm just going to share my screen very quickly. Now, I'm sure many of you. Let me just share that screen. There we go. Okay. I'm sure many of you would have watched the incredible test match earlier on, and just an incredible effort from the Indian team to come back from adversity and everything else that comes with it to win that test series. I was privileged to watch it this morning, and just the pure elation on the faces to see when they got that winning run is a moment of when a plan comes together. And I think you know, there's a hell of a lot that goes into performance planning, and everybody does it in various ways. It's just incredible to see how the Indians went about it and how they came back from a very tough period. Now, JP, my first question to you would be, you've been to Australia many times, you've put in some match-winning performances there. How difficult is it to go to Australia and win a test series?
Yeah, it was one of the hardest challenges that we as a team had to face. And I saw something on Twitter where, you know, in the last 3 occasions that we've been to Australia, we actually beat Australia in a test series. So that's something as a South African team we can be extremely proud of, but it is tough. And it's not just the cricket that gets played. I think you almost feel like the entire country is against you. And I say that respectfully, I don't mean it in a malicious way. You know, now we don't have the crowds necessarily, but back then, you know, having to face the challenges of the crowd and all their sort of antics that goes with it was challenging. And just kind of walking in the street, people were quite snotty in terms of their chirps. So you had to really stick together as a team. And I think that's, if you look now towards this series, that's what India did exceptionally well. There was a lot of talk off the field, both from players and past players and so forth, but yet they stuck together. They trusted in their process. They trusted in their young players coming through. I saw a stat saying that India used 20 players throughout this test series, which has never been done before. And that's an amazing achievement for any team to have the depth that India has and do something that no team has done before. So yeah, it's challenging. But I guess what comes out of that is that it doesn't matter how good you are on paper. It's about what you produce on the day, and they stuck to their sort of mentality in the style of play that they had from an Indian point of view, and it worked beautifully for them.
You mentioned India used 20 players. I think it's the game's ever evolving, and I think the secret to being a successful coach in this day and age is about always trying to find those golden nuggets or whatever else you want to call it that might potentially give you the advantage within a series like that. Very sad to see no crowds, and I know in Australia there were crowds, but around the world, and hopefully we get back to some sort of normality soon. Look, the last thing I'll say before we move on is sometimes you can have the perfect plan in place. It doesn't necessarily mean that plan is going to come together. You know, you're relying on players, you're relying on a buy-in, you're relying on a whole bunch of attributes that need to come together for a performance like that to happen. So getting into the presentation, guys, I wanted us to really understand what this topic was really about. And this is where I'm going to rely on a lot of you guys to maybe interact a little bit. If you don't want to, that's okay. Don't be scared to maybe write in the comments column here, what does performance really mean to you? You know, and I want to give people a little bit of time. What does performance really mean to you? What is it? What are the standouts in performance? What is, and while I'm asking that question to the rest of you, JP, I'm gonna actually throw it at you. You know, what does performance mean to you?
So, in its simplest form, for me, it's the process in striving to achieve a certain outcome or a desired outcome. And what's important for me around this definition and understanding of performance is that planning process. And I thought of a quote when you were talking about not every plan is going to come to fruition. And I remember this quote. It was from a general in the army, and he spoke about, "I found in battle, plans are useless, but planning is indispensable." And what that reminds me of is that it's important, the planning process is important, and that does not mean that that plan is going to work on a specific day or at a specific time, but it's the planning that we went through, that process that we went to, that gears us up for that very moment, because it allows you to then understand, whether it be from a team perspective or conditions perspective, if there needs to be a change or an alter in your strategy. It's the planning process that allows you to do that, not necessarily the plan that you discussed, but it's the planning process. So that's a standout for me.
I like that quote, and it's actually going to tie in nicely to another quote we've got coming up, which we'll just go through again. But it's amazing what pressure does to players. And, you know, sometimes you can, more often than not, if you've got the right plan in place under pressure, that will help you through that pressure. And I think that's a very good quote to bear in mind. The dictionary definition of performance, and I know this is not often exactly how it works, it's the action or the process of performing a task or a function. The continual performance of a single task reduces a man to the level of a machine. Okay, that's basically, I don't know if many of you have heard, you know, the 10,000 hours rule. And people speak about the 10,000 hours rule, and that's obviously goes into your training and everything else. Now, many people have maybe said that that's a myth, but if I look at some of the world's top sportsmen, and I didn't so long ago, I finished reading Tiger Woods' book, and they speak about some of the world's top performers achieving 10,000 hours at the age of 20, whereas someone like Tiger achieved it at the age of 12. So it's just amazing. Yes, he started at a younger age, but it's amazing how his performances were dictated pretty much from starting at a really younger age and honing that skill from a very young age, which ultimately has given him longevity in the game, but also brought a lot of injuries. So it's a bit of a catch-22 situation. I haven't had any comments in terms of what performance means to you guys, but I think it's a, you know, sometimes it's a no-brainer, but sometimes performances might mean various things to other people. JP, you mentioned planning. We're just going to go into the nuts and bolts of planning. You know, in the typical dictionary definition of planning is the process of making plans to achieve something. Mass production methods call for detailed planning. Okay, some coaches and players are highly detailed in what they do. Some guys, it comes more naturally to them. So I think it very much depends on your character as a coach and you as a player, what planning really means to you.
So you were talking about, so I always want to throw that back to you as a coach, because you have the experience for a number of years now. Would you say that your experience as a coach, and particularly the planning process, has changed over the years according to your experience of it?
Yeah, it's a hell of a question, Jace, massively, because I think it very much depends. You're only a product of your environment. You know, I've walked into a very different environment at Scotland where it's required a different method of planning. You know, in South Africa, when I was in South Africa, my methods of planning...
Let's remember Paul's on the call, so just be careful what you...
I'm very wary of Paul being on the call, and actually, I don't mind giving too much away to the Dutch. We're very good mates with them. But yeah, just you know, it does depend what environment you're in, and I think you know, it's important to identify what is going to make, what are the biggest wins that you can create as quickly as you can within that environment. What are the quickest wins I can create? And then for me, it's more of a long-term planning after that. And as we go through the process of performance planning, I think many of you will see how you can go about planning and what are the steps you can look at. And those steps might mean various different things depending on which environment you're in.
Yeah, no, spot on.
So this is, Jake, you had your quote, which was a really good one. This is my quote I put down. He who fails to plan is planning to fail. Now, you know, many guys can go into a game and not have a game plan. And quite often that comes off and that works. You might foul hook a victory. But I think in the longer term and more about being consistent and creating a consistent continuity, I think you need a plan. Whether that plan is the right plan or the wrong plan, it's better to have a plan than have no plan at all. So that just kind of ties into what you were talking about with your quote.
Spot on.
Okay, right. Actually getting into the real sort of nuts and bolts. And guys, again, as a coach, I don't have all the answers, but you know, the way I see performance planning, there are four different departments you can probably break it into. And we're going to go through them, and we're going to go through them in more detail. But just to start off with, the first thing is individual performance planning. It's looking at the individual within the team. So I've got JP Duminy in my team, and I need an individual performance plan for JP Duminy if he's in my team. Okay. And later on, I'm going to show you how you go about creating that plan for him. The second thing in the process is actually coming with a team performance plan. Okay. As much as cricket is a team game, and we hear that mentioned a hell of a lot of the time, it's very much an individual game within a team game. You know, India can go and have a fantastic victory today, but there's still parts of that unit that might not be functioning. And that's where you get exposed in the game of cricket. And I think there's an individual performance plan, but there's also can be a team plan. Individual succession planning for me is about how you as an individual are able to continuously get better over a longer period of time. Okay. And then the same would...
So just a question on that, Shane, particularly on that specific word, succession. And again, we don't know the level of coaches that is on the call. Some might be sort of age group, some might be senior, and that will vary in terms of that succession plan, because you might have a player for a year and he sort of moves on to a different age group. So my question to you is, how important is relationships with, particularly if you're on the lower level, how important is the relationships between the various coaches within an organization? Let's say it's a provincial setup. So if you've got under 15, 17, 19, how important is that relationship and discussion going forward on various players and that succession plan?
I think the best way I can explain that is if I look at some of other sports and some other systems. Okay, I take Barcelona Football Club, for example. They've got an incredible success rate over the last however many years they've been in Czech. And if you look at the way Barcelona Football play, they have a general philosophy of how they play the game. Now, if you watch whichever coach comes into that environment, they generally still play the same way. It doesn't matter whether, I mean, it'd be interesting to see if Jose Mourinho went into Barcelona, whether they would change their ethos of playing. But generally, in a system like that, the coach is not the system. The system is the coach. And I think the important thing for me is if you want to create continuity and a successful environment, it's crucial that you are not seen to be the figure that creates that success in that environment. You need to feed off the other people within that environment and ultimately enforce your philosophy throughout the whole system, which can be taken down all the way down the pipeline. Now, in many systems, it doesn't work like that. We know that. But in some systems it does. And I think in the most successful systems in the world, that's how it works. I just have to look at the All Black rugby team. That's what happens there. They play a certain brand of rugby, and that's inbred in them from a very, very young age. So the word succession might be, in this case, I wouldn't say the wrong word to use. I would like to maybe see more performance. We want to see performance in our players. So the word succession might deem to be a little bit aggressive.
Sustainable performance.
Yes, sustainable performance. We want to see a consistent performance. For me as a coach, I want to see consistency rather than this up and down nature of performances. That would be my philosophy.
So a sort of story and thing that I want to mention, particularly around planning, is an experience that I had well into the sort of infancy part of my international career, where I got left out. And I'm thinking about this planning process and its combination of individual and team planning. So I played for South Africa and had a good run, and then I hit a bad patch, but then I got left out from the South African team, went down to the domestic setup, franchise setup. And one of the most amazing things happened to me from the coach that was there at the time, which was Richard Pybus. Some of you might have heard of him. And you talk about individual and team succession planning intertwining. And he came to me my very first session back, my practice session, and he said, "What? I wanna have a conversation with you, but I want to talk about how are we gonna get you back to the national team." So that was such an interesting process, because here was a coach that didn't necessarily have to think about succession, what's going forward, but yet part of his experience as a coach was one to how to get the best out of me, was to say, right, this is a level that you've operated on for a while and you've been to the national level. So I want to help you get back. So that individual plan fits into that team plan that then ultimately, you know, it's kind of a smooth road in many ways where, right, and we're always going to have a review system, aren't we? After every game or a couple of games, we review, right, what do we need to tweak? What do we need to get better at? What is working well? And I think that is where things work extremely well, for me at least, is that individual and team succession planning is a conversation, but is built out of a relationship that keeps building and out of trust. So that was an important journey for me in that process.
So valuable conversation like that. And I think what Pabi did very well there, and it's no surprise that Pabi's been to many different systems, you know, and been successful in many different systems. Straight away, what he did is he probably did step one with you, Japes. And ultimately, he got your buy-in straight away, didn't he? Yeah. Now, if I can come at it from a coaching point of view, you know, we might have a few coaches on this webinar who are coaching in various different setups. I think everybody always wants the top job, because that's where the fame, the money, and all that sort of stuff might be. Sometimes it can be a very lonely place. However, I think the more valuable coaches are within your pipeline. That is that maybe that franchise or semi-professional or pipeline coach that has to deal with the player going up and coming down. You know, when you're a national coach, that's the top level. It doesn't get higher than that. So you're not dealing with players coming down a level. And what Pabi did incredibly well there was engaging with you straight away as a senior player at that time, because he knew he needed performances out of you, which would ultimately make his team play well, which would propel you straight back into the Proteas setup. So I think as a learning experience from a coach, he handled that situation unbelievably well. Yeah. And that fed off you in a really good way, didn't it?
100%.
Brilliant. And then, you know, so it's pretty easy, guys. You know, coaching sometimes isn't rocket science. It's about putting procedures in place and sometimes following a bit of a method. So this is a 4-step process, which will ultimately, hopefully, help you plan better and will bring out better performances. If we start getting into the real nuts and bolts, okay, we're going to look at individual performance planning to begin with. Now, I've got 7 areas of an individual performance plan that you can look at and maybe start facilitating a conversation with players about which of these areas might help them within their game. Okay, so I'm going to go through them very quickly, and then we're going to just look at them after that. So number 1 is identifying a player's skill set, finding out what they are really good at, and then also finding out which are the areas they might need to be improving in, which will ultimately help them in the team. Fielding is obviously massive nowadays. You know, nowadays I see guys picking up with one hand. Fielding's gone to a completely different level and can quite often be the difference between winning and losing games. And I'll go into more detail with that in a couple of minutes. Strength and conditioning really come into the game nowadays. You've got all your strength and conditioning trainers that actually become a big part of the team. But for me, the more important thing is a player understanding why he needs to buy into the strength and conditioning. Nutrition, how you feel in your body, which ultimately keeps guys on the field for 5 days in test matches. You know, I will make mention of that Australian bowling attack, and Justin Langer spoke about it. There were those 4 guys that played every single test match. And you just think the sort of recovery that's required and the workloads and everything else that's required. And don't underestimate how important nutrition is that goes into that to allow them to come back and recover and play the next test match again. The 5th thing on that list is mental conditioning. And JP, I'm going to rack your brain with that when we come around to it again in terms of how important that is once you move up the levels and the sort of people that can assist you with that. The 6th thing is time on task. Your actual time you put into developing your skill and honing your skill, okay? And we spoke about the 10,000 hour rule a little bit earlier, but more important for me, it's smart training, okay? Which ultimately decides how you train for longer periods. You sometimes don't need to train for longer periods of time. It's just about training smartly, but it's really about you understanding your game. And then the last thing is lifestyle management. You know, it's not all about cricket. JP, you've made the transition now out of cricket. Well, not out of cricket, but out of playing cricket into the next phase of your life. And sometimes we underestimate how important it is to pick up a few new skills while he's still playing the game to make that transition a hell of a lot easier and to take the pressure off your cricket sometimes.
Yeah.
So, so the first thing, let's go around it again, JP.
Yeah.
Skill set. I mean, how important was it for you identifying what you did really well and then maybe adding one or two things to your skill set?
So for me, the crucial point that I want to make around that first point is, again, comes back to the relationship between player and coach. So the one thing that I've found in my playing experience, and many people speak about this point as there's a lack of it, is communication. So often, and that creeps up in sport, high-level sport, lower-level sport, in business. There's always this talk about lack of communication, and that's kind of been broken down into many levels in terms of people's experience. But for me, the skill set is about identifying, right, what are my strengths, what are my challenges, and how do I get better at that? And that doesn't necessarily mean that you must always do that by yourself. It's a conversation between yourself and the coach, and working out and knowing your role within the team, and then working out, all right, so where can I add more value and how can I get better at certain skills that allows me to contribute a lot more? So if I could put myself in that bracket, I was always a top order batter that bowled off spin. But how could I get myself, in terms of my skill set, from a spin bowling perspective, up to a level that allowed the captain or the coach or the leadership to be able to affect selection in terms of how they selected according to conditions? That was a strength that I had in my skill set, because I knew and had discussions about, right, these are the areas that I want to improve on. And then obviously at the higher level, yes, you have the opportunities to work one-on-one with those kind of coaches that gives you that opportunity.
And I think what you mentioned there, it's very handy for a coach to have any top six batter that can give him a few overs, whether that's in ODI cricket, T20 cricket, or even in Test match cricket for that matter. You know, it's really handy. And I think what you did is you identified an opportunity for you not only to keep yourself in the team, but for the team to allow better performances for the team, and to maybe allow your coach to pick a couple of different combinations.
Sure.
The other thing I just want to mention, and JP spoke about communication. Now, as a coach, this is a word that comes up a hell of a lot when you're getting feedback from players. Now, the two things that always come up for me is, coach, I want you to communicate with me, and coach, I want you to be honest with me. Those are, for me, are the two things that always come up from players. Now, the first thing I'm going to make mention of, and it's actually something we touch on in one of the other webinars that we're going to be covering over the next few days, is how we communicate and the forms of communication. The big thing for me is communication is a two-way street, okay? Sometimes if you're not getting that communication, you need to seek that communication, okay? And there's various ways of doing that, which we will cover in another webinar. But without that communication, it's very hard to identify that skill sets and what you really need to be working on. You know, James, the other thing I'll mention in terms of a skill set is I don't know how you feel about this, but I grew up in an era where not necessarily the coaches were telling us what not to do, but they were constantly telling us maybe what's going to go wrong if we try the reverse sweeps and the sweeps of the world. Whereas nowadays I see the game's gone to a level of it's okay to fail when trying that. You know, it's okay to do that because we need you to do that for the team to perform. And then you go about training that skill. So I think the game's really shifted from a coaching point of view. I don't know if you noticed that maybe in the back end of your career.
No, spot on. Not even towards the back end, probably in the last 7-8 years, things have seriously advanced. The technology has advanced in terms of the data that you are able to access. So yeah, things have really moved up, which is great. And I think if you look at the next points, so 2, 3, and 4, I think those kind of intertwine and they link up together very much. Fielding, strength and conditioning, and nutrition are very similarly attached and contribute together. And you know, this is something that I had to put a lot of emphasis on in terms of my experience. My strength and conditioning was something that it didn't come naturally, and I relied a lot on my skill set to get me through my career, and then quickly found out that, that was going to be a big part of my game in longevity of my career. And nutrition fell into that, which then affected my fielding. Because ultimately, as you would know as a coach, fielding very much is in some ways a controllable as a team and an emphasis as a team, and something that whenever you do practice sessions, as all the coaches would know on here, fielding is something that builds camaraderie, it builds team spirit, and making sure that we believe and trust one another and backing up one another, and fielding as a skill gives you that.
Definitely. And two of the things that you've mentioned are controllables, in my opinion. Your strength and conditioning is a controllable, and your fielding is a controllable. Now, Paul's getting a lot of airtime on here, but Paul, even the Dutch team would be speaking a lot about fielding, and that's something that could potentially set us apart from those other teams. Now, it's very easy to say that, but it's more about how you go into it and identify and train and ultimately make you a better fielding team. But strength and conditioning has a huge role to play in that. And when players buy into that and see the value of nutrition, strength and conditioning, you see the other stuff go through the roof. And the last thing I want to make a point of, for me as a coach, it's not about that player having a six-pack. It's not aesthetically pleasing. It's more being cricket fit and being able to go the next day and being able to perform 3, 4, 5 days down the line. That for me is what's really important. JP, we made mention of those first four. Tell me how important is the mental side of the game, especially, moving into a high level of cricket, it's probably vital. But, what was your process in developing from a mental side, going through the age groups, maybe into international cricket? What sort of support base did you have?
So in many ways, this is probably one of the biggest attributes that contribute to a successful international cricketer, the mental capacity. And I wouldn't say that was my strongest point. I had many challenges around that. But I think where things worked well from a mental point of view, and I think this is something that, you think about your mental conditioning coaches and those kind of guys, when they come into team environments, they speak often about vulnerability. And this is where I found where, and I use this word very loosely, success lies in many ways, is the ability to be able to be vulnerable within your safe space, 100%. The environment needs to be safe to be able to do that. But that is the starting point for me in achieving better things from a mental point of view. It's almost acknowledging my shortcomings from a mental point of view, and then moving forward from there and using the tools around you, whether it be having conversations with coaches, having conversations with your mental conditioning coach, even your specific coaches, but also the mental side of the game. So if I'm working with a batting coach, it doesn't mean I'm only going to be having conversations about the actual skill set. It's the mental approach to it as well. And that often happens in one, getting tested mentally in your practice sessions. So what makes you uncomfortable, and sort of focusing and honing in on that and having honest and vulnerable conversations about that. So admitting it is important to be able to overcome. So this fear of failure was probably one of my biggest hurdles in my playing career. But how I dealt with it, I wouldn't say that I got over it. I'll be even brave enough to say that I don't think people get over it. I think they find mechanisms and ways to deal with it a lot better. And it was first admitting that these are the challenges. Right now you're working out a strategy of how you're going to be facing it on a daily basis. And that's the important thing, because you can break that down to many things about your different skills that you have to do, and how am I going to get better from a mental point of view. And that starts with many conversations with the people that you trust and in your environment.
It's well explained, Japes, and I think Grant's made mention here, and Grant, I'm going to bring your comment into it here, that coaching can sometimes be a very lonely place. And quite often we talk about mental conditioning for players, but we don't really talk about how we look after yourself as a coach.
Yeah.
Japes, how important is the coach in the mental conditioning process for you as a player?
It's a tough one. So I'm speaking more from a player's perspective. Players are often reluctant to speak vulnerably and openly to the head coach, because they always have this idea that it affects selection, which I believe in many ways, I don't believe that is true. And if you have a coach that is comfortable in his job, in who he is as a coach, and how he's trying to implement his understanding and thinking on his team, I think he will be able to speak through and walk a journey with a player through this process of getting better, whether it be physically or mentally. And I think if we're obviously talking to coaches here, and I think that's, for me, in pursuing a coaching journey, that's something that I'm so aware of, is that transparency, honesty, and openness between player and coach is one of the biggest things that creates opportunities to get the best out of people, like best out of players. So how can I create an environment that allows that? Even come and speak to the head coach, because ultimately you want your players to come and speak openly to you, even if it means that they're not dealing with a certain situation well. What can you say in that moment that is going to help that person? Is it, because it's definitely not, in my mind, it's not going to be, how can you be thinking that right now? Right? You've got to identify, right, this is where he is. Okay, so what am I going to say to him right now that is going to allow him to refocus? So sometimes you don't always have that opportunity because it might be on game day, but genuinely you want that to be in your preparation process, to be having those vulnerable and open conversations that you know the trigger points for certain players. And those are important for me.
Absolutely. And I think as a coach, quite often we're inclined to try look at the mistakes you're making rather than actually what you're doing well. It's very common for a coach to do that. And I think it comes down to, sometimes it might not be a technical fault that you have. Maybe it's just a mental error that you keep making. And as a coach, it's about us identifying what is that, you know.
Yeah.
And also, you know, the other thing is I need to give freedom to a player to go out and want to execute and want to perform and want to play all these great shots and win us the game and really express himself. If a player goes out and plays that way and makes a mistake, I can't come down hard on him because he's made that mistake. However, if that mistake is a technical or mental error, it's my job as a coach to facilitate a conversation to help that player. And I think as long as the player is not making the same mistake over and over again, which the good players don't do, if we're completely honest, then I'm okay as a coach. If it was just poor execution, but the shot was on, you've got to be happy with that as a coach because you're encouraging them to play that way.
Honest. Spot on.
So, I mean, in terms of number 6 and 7, lifestyle management and time on task, I think goes without saying. And quite often as coaches, our challenges come with facilities. They come with time that we might have with the squad or those players, because let's be honest, not everybody is a professional cricketer. And it's being smart with how you utilize that time and how you might utilize the players at your disposal. I think lifestyle management, Japes, while you were playing, were you studying? How did you manage your time away from the game?
Yeah, I did a few courses while playing, particularly towards the back end of my career. So that was something that was a positive distraction. But also, if I'm honest, probably becoming a father was probably a big thing in terms of a positive distraction. And the reality of one of my favorite coaches telling me, or Shukri Conrad is the name, he said to me at a very young age in my playing career, he said, cricket is just a part of my life. It's not my life. And ultimately, as a young cricketer, we can get so lost in that concept of making cricket our lives that we forget, yes, it is a big part, but it's not the entire part of our lives. Because why that is, if your identity is completely wrapped in your cricket and particularly your performance, ultimately your life is going to be a major roller coaster, because we know that cricket is a sport that you probably fail more than you succeed. And particularly if you break it down into batting and bowling, batters, I mean, the best in the world achieve probably 1 out of 3 times. So those are crucial components in terms of conversations had and lifestyle management, making sure that you're looking after and taking care of yourself off the field, and making sure that those relationships outside of the game are sound and important, and you have a good support structure.
You mentioned communication, so I think it's good that we just move on now and get into a bit of team planning and what a coach could look into. For me, preparation is always king. If you prepare well, and you're willing to prepare almost harder than you're willing to play, if that makes sense, your team will always be in a pretty good position. Now, the first thing we need to do is identify how we want to play, which will then identify how we want to train. Okay, and that goes through conversations with coaches, leadership groups, players, etc. Maybe at a lower level, that's more about the coach facilitating those conversations with all the players. I think the higher level you go, it's more about the players having those conversations. Big thing as a coach is probably looking at your non-negotiables and your philosophy as a coach. You know, every coach will be different in this sense. A non-negotiable for me might be manners. If you arrive, I want you to say hello. I want you to greet your fellow teammates. And when you leave, I want you to say goodbye. Now, that might be a very small thing to some people, but to a certain coach, that might mean a hell of a lot. So that could be a non-negotiable. Another non-negotiable could be how we train with purpose. You know, that could be a non-negotiable. So when we come to train, and I was watching an incredible documentary the other night called Chasing the Sun, and it's about how the Springboks won the Rugby World Cup. And one of the players was interviewed, and he said it was incredible in the build-up to the semi-final and the final how tough training sessions were. And they actually found that, not that a Rugby World Cup final is ever easy, but they found that the training sessions were sometimes harder than when they were out there playing. And that's I think that's pretty powerful when you can get into that sort of frame of mind. And then the other thing is the values, JP, and this is where I really want you to come in and speak a little bit about team culture. You know, you were involved in that Proteas fire, and how it was. I'm really keen to hear how it was sprung out, and what it all meant to you, and how important it was to the team being successful.
So the first thing I want to mention around those 3 points, and ultimately it sort of intertwines and creates this sort of culture cohesion between your team, and the identity, non-negotiable, and values, depending on the level of coach and team that you are in, could vary. And I think we can all attest to that, because if I'm sharing my experiences in a high level, obviously you have access to more. You have access to more people, you have access to more facilities and those kind of things. Whereas when you come down to the sort of basic levels below, you've got to be very mindful of what you have in front of you and how do you work with what you have in front of you. And I think the first point is identity. Who are we? And that goes across the board, whether you high level or amateur, is who are you, what do you stand for, and what do you want to stand for authentically as a team? And I think those are critical questions to be answered, not only for you as a coach, but for you as a team environment, whoever's involved in that environment. So you talk about non-negotiables, you talk about values. I think they go hand in hand. And you speak about the simple things of your non-negotiables, but there's and to add on to that, you would always also want to add it and throw it out to your team and ask, as a team, what do you want to stand for as your non-negotiables and your values? Because ultimately you are the gatekeepers of those non-negotiables, philosophies, and values. Because as a coach, depending on your level, you're going to come in and try and implement a certain philosophy, but you also got to be comfortable with change. You've also got to be open to hearing ideas, open to hearing suggestions, that we can't be rigid in our thinking. We have to be open to listen. And I think some of the great coaches out there have that unique ability to be able to listen very well and still implement their philosophies with a sort of loose structure around what they're trying to implement, and allow teams to come together and take hold of non-negotiables and values. And I think that is a great starting point of understanding and creating a sound team culture, because it will evolve. Things will pop up, things will come into the environment that you would need to face, but understanding that bubble of us being in the environment, what are the non-negotiables, what are our values, what are some of the things that are going to be outside our circle, that are out of our control, and how do we manage that process? How do we trust the process inside to be able to manage the process outside? And that for a period of time that I was certainly part of that national team, we found ways to do that pretty well. But also when I talk about authentic, how do we communicate and relate as a national team now to a country that is so diverse in different cultures, and how do we connect with every culture? And that in itself is still a challenge today. And it will go across for various countries, Scotland, Netherlands, the UK, whoever's on the call. That will be a challenge. How do you connect with every culture? And you uniquely will have that diverse culture within your side, and how do you connect with each other first to be able to spread it out?
Absolutely. And again, it comes back to you're a product of your environment. You can't walk into, I certainly can't walk into a Scottish culture and expect it to be a South African culture.
Yeah.
I think your really good coaches identify very quickly these three things, put them in place. And I look at guys like someone like a Mickey Arthur, who's been, it'd be fascinating to have a chat to him and see about how he's gone in and out of various cultures. He's coached 4 international teams.
Yeah.
Now, it'd be very interesting to have a conversation with him and see what have the different cultures really meant. And now he's with a team like Sri Lanka, which will be a completely different culture to a Pakistan, or South Africa with other teams he was involved in. Yeah. So I think it's really important what you mentioned. And I think if you can identify those things first and then get into scheduling, find out what are the fixtures that are upcoming, and kind of work backwards from that. How am I going to have to set my team up and my squad up to be able to make sure that we can go to all these fixtures and perform? What does that mean from a training perspective? And quite often it's easier to work yourself backwards from a scheduling point of view than to do it the other way around. It's very nice to know what's ahead of us and what we need to be planning for. The next thing is identifying what is the team makeup, and we can use a bit of depth analysis. Now, when I look at depth analysis, all that really means is if Virat Kohli, for example, has left to go and see the birth of his first child, who comes in to replace Virat Kohli? And we want to make sure that that player is ready to go. Now, obviously, I'm speaking about it from a very high level and a high point of view in terms of international cricket. That might change as you go lower down the system, and you might have an opportunity to give people more opportunities in different positions, etc., etc. But at the international level, you want to make sure that guys are primed to come in and nail that specific role that you might be preparing them for. So that's the team makeup and then depth analysis, and it's crucial to know who you've got available at your disposal to come in and perform. And remember, whoever we've got coming in, it shouldn't be a surprise that they're performing. It shouldn't be a surprise that Rishabh Pant comes in today and wins a test match. That's what they expect from him, because he's put in the preparation. They've backed him enough and he's gone in and done it. And I think that's the key to depth analysis. And then the last one, and certainly not the least important, JP, is leadership. And I know, more at the back end of your career, you took up a leadership role. How important are leaders within a team environment?
So I think we all know that they are important, and even more so are the leaders without titles in your environment. So, one thing that I've realized in my playing career, what works really well is creating a core group of players that look after certain aspects of your environment, and you are reliant on them to lead in those spheres. So something that was big for me was team culture and unity within the side. So being able and having the skill set to connect with different cultural groups within our side. Can I find ways to do that? Can I find ways to have conversations and deep connections with people from different cultures? And that was my role, but that didn't have a title to it. And if Faf was the captain, it was important for me to relay certain messages to him that I thought that he could do differently or add to make sure that we are inclusive in various things that we do. And then you'll have various other players in your environment that lead different other aspects of your environment. And again, that is high level, yes, but I think you can have a form of it in whatever level you are coaching. You just got to be very mindful and have sort of tangible outcomes with it in many ways, on whether there's feedback or reviews within those that senior management, or not management group, the senior core group of leaders, and consistently communicating with one another in our roles and responsibilities. And again, I think you can have aspects of that as you go down the levels.
Definitely. It's about taking probably that captain's armband and it's not just all about him. I think it's surrounding him. And in many ways, all 11 guys on the park are leaders. They're all performing a leadership role in some way, shape, or form. And it's about you empowering them and giving them the knowledge and the backing to go out and be leaders. And I think that's crucial. And I think once you follow this cycle, that's ultimately probably going to lead you to a desired outcome. Now, that desired outcome might be success. It might be winning cricket games. It might be moving players onto the next level, which might be your job as a coach. If you're an academy coach, your role is to move players onto the next level. It's as simple as that. You are not there just to win games. And I think sometimes that's where guys get it wrong. So this is a process, guys, that you can follow. It's not the holy grail. It's not going to completely demand performance and success, but I think it's an opportunity to follow a cycle to hopefully achieve your desired outcome. So so that's how you can go about team planning, guys. I'm very much aware of time too, so I'm just going to move on. I can see Johnny's got a question in the group chat here, and it's, how do you manage yourself from a coaching perspective if you have multiple players wanting to speak one-on-one? And I think, Johnny, just while I move on to this slide, again, this moves me into the slide. It's about facilitating conversations at the right time. You know, that might be at practice. That might be using technology that we have nowadays. That might be finding extra time outside of your normal coaching hours. And the one big point I want to make to coaches today is everybody thinks it's about the glitz and glamour of coaching and the interviews and whatever else. Sometimes people don't see the hard work that goes in behind the scenes that is ultimately going to maybe get those performances, those desired outcomes that we talk about. So those one-to-one chats might need to be taking place outside of working hours. And I think as a coach, your working hours never really stop. You know, so good luck to all the women out there who's married to a coach, or the men who's married to a coach, whoever it might be. Good luck, because the working hours are long. And that's not because they need to be, it's because you want them to be, because you want to be seeing people reach their potential. Now, the way you can facilitate conversations with, and I'm going to try to go through this a little bit quickly, guys, is with individual succession planning. And we keep mentioning this, facilitating conversations. A good way to do it is to break it up into short-term goals, medium-term goals, long-term goals. And there's a couple of other things you can add, and I'm going to go through the process very quickly with you. Very important about the questions you ask players, okay? Be very specific, be very real with them, understand where they currently are, and try identify where they want to get to in a very short period of time, whether that be the next month or a couple months later. Find out what their targets or their goals might be for the upcoming season, but just remember that every single player is not target or goal driven. They might be driven in various different ways. So I'm going to use a very quick example, and I might actually use it when I get more to the long-term goals. But JP, please remind me about the National Academy example I'd like to use with one of the players that came in. It's got to be very relevant to the environment and the situation. So it's important to chat about short-term goals with your players, because for me, these are the quick wins you can make with players. Okay, if you can get these things right and you make some quick wins, you get the buy-in very quickly, and then ultimately the mid-term goals, these over here, become a hell of a lot easier. Okay, so from a medium-term goal perspective, this is probably what a player wants to achieve over and beyond the season that's ahead of you. And maybe this might come more into skill development and maybe physical development, S&C, because we know that doesn't happen overnight. Okay, so those conversations need to take place. And you can also start chatting more about life outside of cricket and really getting to understand your player, because I guarantee you that you're not going to know them within the first 3 months. It takes a bit of time. Okay, from a long-term goal perspective, this is where you want the player to be maybe in 3 years' time, maybe 4 or 5 years' time. There's no specific time frame on it. But a long-term goal might be someone wanting to represent their country, just as an example. And James, don't worry, you don't need to remind me. This is where I'm going to bring the story in.
Okay.
I really want to talk about this story because we were at the National Academy a few years ago, and you speak about Shukri Conrad, and I was sitting with Shukri, and we were doing performance development plans with the players coming in. And I won't mention the player who walked in because I don't think that's fair to him. But he walked in, and as a long-term goal, all the other players had walked in and said, "I want to play for South Africa. I want to, play ODI cricket. I want to play T20 cricket," and we try to put a plan together for them. This particular player walked in and said, "I want to be the best batsman in the world," as a long-term goal. Now that hits you straight away as a coach, and you think, okay, I mean, are you the next Virat Kohli? Are you the next Steve Smith? But just to hear a player say that and then start thinking about how you've got to plot a plan to get him to become the best batsman in the world takes a hell of a lot of buy-in, not only from him, but from you as a coach too. So I think that was his long-term goal, you know, and I think as coaches, we also have to facilitate dreams. Don't ever forget that. For me, it's also, and we use this word golden nuggets. Quite often, these are good questions to ask your players at training, okay? What do you need to do to make your tick at practice? Because it doesn't always mean if you're a good practice, if you practice well, you're going to play well. Some guys are terrible practices, but I always like guys to practice well because I think it gives them the best chance. Okay. When are you best at practice sessions? What does that look like to you? What behaviors do I need to show when I'm training well? Because it's not just about hitting cricket balls or bowling cricket balls. And then how are you in terms of challenging training? Are you willing to accept a challenging training session to actually become better? And I actually used the Chasing the Sun, which is that documentary example a little bit earlier about practice hard, play easy. Sometimes training needs to be a little bit tougher than you might find it out in the middle. Now, if you're coaching a young kid, that doesn't mean that you have to put the fear of God in him in terms of hitting him with a cricket ball. That's where maybe you could use a tennis ball, for example, but you could still have a tough training session or catch one-handed. Make it tough for them, you know, just to make sure that in a game, it just, when the pressure's on, it does feel that little bit easier. From a match perspective, actually getting into game time and looking for a player to perform, these are the sort of questions you can also ask them. What do you need to do to make you tick during games? So what is your pre-game routine, for example? When are you best during matches? What does that look like? What goes through your mind when you're playing well, if anything at all? What does the best version of myself look like, and how do I want to play? These are all questions you can ask your player, which ultimately you might get answers about how they need to be training, what they need, what you want to be seeing from them during a game, how they need to be behaving. And if they're not and they may be performing poorly, you can maybe call them out on those things because they are the ones that mentioned this is what it needs to look like. And I think that's a far more powerful place to be coming from as a coach. And then just the last thing, as JP mentioned, is the life away from cricket, which I think is a crucial part of the puzzle, guys. Okay. What do you need to do to relax? Do you have any other hobbies outside of cricket? Could be fishing, could be anything. Do you play any other sports? Because I'm a huge fan of multi-sports and kids playing different sports, and it teaches them spatial awareness, impact, when they need to make impact, how their footwork works, etc. Do they study? And what is their family situation? You know, quite often we just talk about cricket, but let's actually find out about the person a little bit more. Do they have a mom and dad? Are they walking to practice? What is their situation at home? What is their background? And I think that's crucial. JP, is there anything in there that resonates for you as a player?
There's one point that I want to make, and it speaks into that last point on family situation. And it's a little bit of a holistic point that I want to make. And one of the biggest realizations for me as a player, thinking about a coach, is the impact that he has on my life. And then I put myself on the other side and I think of myself as a coach. And one thing that I would like to share on this platform is the realization of the influence that you have on people and players in particular, obviously. But the influence is not only about runs and wickets and performances on the field. It's an holistic view on having an impact on a player. And my hope for coaches, as I develop potentially into a coach, is in terms of conversation, is realizing the impact that you have, and that how you speak to them, the language you use, has a long-lasting impact on their lives. And I think of that as a player, and I think of coaches that really meant a lot to me. I can still think of various nuggets that they've said along the journey because they played a bigger role than just me performing on the field. So it's about understanding the impact and making sure that you take that seriously in terms of how you conduct yourself, in front of players, but also in the language that you use.
I have no doubt that all of you on this platform can probably think back to a cricket coach they might have had when they were younger and how that person might have impacted their lives. And I think that's a very valuable thing that JP just mentioned. Understand the impact you can make on people's lives. And quite often you're a role model, you're a coach, you're a father figure, but never forget that you're a coach. And it's ultimately about educating. And more often than not, be the example that you want to be seeing, I think, is the big message you probably want to put out there.
Yeah.
The next thing is team succession planning. Now, what I've come up with, guys, is this is, again, not the Holy Grail. This is something I personally came up with as a coach, and I'll tell you why I did it. I wanted to see where my team was in terms of the ages that they are compared to the matches that they've played. And I wanted to plot it on a graph to see where my players were. And I didn't realize the sort of information I would get from it when I started it, but I just did it as a bit of fun, whether it was a lockdown exercise or something, I don't know, I might have been bored, but actually, I think it's just quite nice to share with you guys that you can do, and I'm more than happy to share it. So what I did was I drew a graph like this, and if you look right at the bottom where the matches is on the left-hand side of the column, right at the bottom would probably be a lack of experience, or should we say a person with minimum experience in terms of games at an international level, or good experience. And you can change this graph according to however you want to as a coach. Okay, at the bottom I plotted an age. What I did was I broke it into 4 different sections. Okay, I numbered them 1, 2, 3, and 4. Pretty simple stuff. Okay. And what I then did is, if I could just explain what the quadrants might mean. If you have a player that will be plotted in number 1 and 2 of the graph, more often than not, that player might be young or old, depending on the bottom graph, but he won't have a hell of a lot of experience behind him in terms of game time. Okay. The others to be said, if they're in numbers 3 or 4, okay, more often than not, whether they're young or old, they would have played quite a few games for their country or their club or their team or whatever else, and it's a pretty good section to be in. 1 and 4, more often than not, is your younger player that has played, making his debut, or someone who's been in the system for a long period of time, maybe a Quinton de Kock or someone like that that's played a lot of cricket, but he's still a young man. Section 2 and 3 over there is maybe an older player that hasn't played as much, and number 3 is pretty much where you want guys to be if they experience. I've put a big red block there, and it might be a little bit harsh if players find themselves in that section. It's because that's generally your older player that maybe hasn't played as much and might be coming to the end of their career. Okay, that for me is a money maker. If you can get guys in number 4, you're doing a great job, and those guys have got longevity in their careers. Okay, so what I did is you then plot your players, and you see where they are on that list, and ultimately it might tell you where your players are. Now, what I did was okay, I've got my players' information, but what happens if I actually plot other teams on this too? And what it starts doing is it starts showing you and giving you a really good indication of where your players might be on the map. Okay. Now, again, this is just an example of what you can do and sort of the different things you come up with as a coach. But for me, it gives me a really good idea of where the players are, and maybe that I need to look at some of the younger players and give them opportunities in different roles to go out so that they can get into that number 3 or that number 4 block that little bit quicker. Just before I move on, does that make sense to you? Are there any questions on that?
So the point that I wanted to make was, and it's aimed at all the coaches on the platform, is it's a great way of sort of analyzing and looking at your team and seeing how you can really utilize them to their full potential. And I just wanted to say that this is obviously a recording, and this is something that you really need to sit with and analyze and think about how you want to utilize this if you needing to do so. But really, you can go back to the recording and really listen to the conversation from Shane and then understand how this actually works. Because it is, I wouldn't say complicated, it is something that needs a relook and a relook at. Because remember, this is something that you've thought about for many months and sort of took out, put in, adjusted to suit how it can utilize, how it can be utilized for your team. So that's an important thing to acknowledge.
Yeah, and to me it makes perfect sense. But I think to people out there, they might be thinking, "What are you talking about? This is a different language." But I suppose the biggest thing I want to get across to coaches today is don't be scared to experiment. Don't be scared to try different things. because you're going to get a few things wrong. And I think in getting things wrong, that is the way you get things right. So this is a way of doing it, to check where your team is in terms of succession planning. There's many other ways, but this is one of them. Guys, I want to just make mention of, please just put some questions in there that we can answer. We're going to move across to some questions very shortly. We're coming to the end of the presentation. So the last quote is from Timothy Galway, and his quote is, "Coaching is unlocking a person's potential to maximize their own performance. It is helping them to learn rather than teaching them." So I think if there's the last message I can leave with you as coaches is, don't forget, and JP made mention of it earlier, about how important your impact is as a coach and as a mentor or as a father or whatever else it might be. But try encourage guys to learn from those mistakes. And that's, for me, how they become better players, and you can get better performance out of them.
So just just to add quickly something there, Shane, just to acknowledge that coaching is a selfless job. Honestly, it is. You don't, when teams are playing well, a lot of the players will get accolades, and when teams are not, often there's question marks around coaches. And it's to understand that process, really. And I'm interested to see how I will respond to those situations, because it's easier said than done, isn't it? And yeah, that allowing that growth and learning process and freedom, and something that I've really come to understand about freedom is that freedom is only true freedom once you have the freedom to fail. And that has been a massive learning for me as a player, but even going forward as a coach. If I can allow players the freedom to fail, within reason, obviously, you having conversation and reviews after, let's say, a failure, what was the thinking behind it? There's various conversational points that will happen behind that. But the point I want to make is realize that freedom is true freedom only when you have the freedom to get it wrong.
Definitely. And I think if you're going into coaching for the fame, the money, the accolades, trust me, you're not going to get it. As a coach, you've got to be selfless. You will get it through various other ways. The one thing, I made the transition from playing into coaching relatively easily, because I found maybe as a player I wasn't, selfish is the wrong word. It's the wrong word to use, but in many ways you need to be, as a cricketer, to look after your own performances, which ultimately helps the team. But as a coach, I get all the things I used to get as a player, bar the actual running in and doing it for yourself. So when your team's doing well, the players are playing great. But when your team's doing badly, the coach is rubbish. And I think that as a coach, you've got to have a strong backbone if you're going to go into it, depending on which level you want to try push your way into. And it's a very good message that JP sends out there. But guys, in terms of the presentation, we've come to the end of the presentation. From a performance planning point of view, again, I don't think there's enough time in the day to cover everything we need to cover. I hope we've given you guys enough to be able to ask some questions, and I really want to encourage some questions right now. I'm going to pass over to Mike to come on and maybe just take a few questions from the group. But thank you very much, and JP, the insight's been nothing short of remarkable.
Thanks everyone, appreciate it. Hope it's been inside.
Let me know if you guys can hear me.
Yeah, we can.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Okay, great. Then you stopped your presentation. Okay, cool. I've called in. I'm having a bit of Wi-Fi issues here, so I've phoned in as well. So yeah, guys, I think that was awesome. I'm sitting here in awe. I know we sort of very briefly kind of discussed the presentation quite a while ago. So yeah, to hear you guys talking off like that, it's brilliant. I really think everybody here today, and you guys can comment, did you guys get a good value from it? Was it a good session today? Let us know. Just put a yes, a big Y in there if you think it was a good session, and if you guys got value out of it, just put it in the comments there. Just pop it down. I think it was awesome. I learned a lot of things, and I must say, just from being involved with a lot of the teams, domestic and international, hearing what you guys have been saying, I can kind of think back to a lot of the situations where I can relate from a management point of view, not from a physio perspective. But yeah, I'd also like the mental coach things, and I think it was really, really cool, and just a lot of value being added. So yeah, thanks very much. I think it was really brilliant. So just to, I think as far as questions go, Shane actually answered most of them as you were going through, so I don't have many questions coming through.
Here's one from Liam Kibero. Just starting out as a coach. I can read it off if you want.
Yeah, go for it, Ted. You're on it.
I'm just starting out as a coach. I'm trying to use cricket to fix the community and trying to show the kids another way. How does an up-and-coming coach make kids believe in the journey and trying to make them a better cricketer? So Shane, if you're comfortable, I'll answer that one.
Go for it, James. All yours.
So Liam, I think that's a really good question, and I don't think there's one specific way around that. And having been seen as a role model in disadvantaged communities for many years, it's always one of the biggest challenge is getting kids buy-in. And for me, the biggest thing around that is building relationships with them and understanding that your role in that way is not just about the performance. It's about getting them away from those negative influences in the community and using sport as a vehicle. And your role in that community goes far beyond just being a cricket coach. It's about being a father in many ways, a brother, a mentor, and understanding that process and really taking an interest in the kid's life. And this probably a message for everyone, really. We all come from different backgrounds and experiences, but it's really understanding that your role goes beyond the cricket coach. And once they get to a point of trusting you, you'll be able to correct them in many ways. So I came across a very good friend of mine, Russell Aspeling, shared this concept with me. And I try to utilize it a lot as a parent, but it speaks so heavily into coaching as well. It's a concept about connection and correction. And often in relationships, we often need a connection first before we can really correct somebody and make the ultimate impact that you're wanting. And sometimes we don't always have that luxury of having a complete connection out of trust and then being able to correct whoever you're speaking to. And ultimately, if you think about communities and young kids in the community, there's many things that you want to correct. And sometimes you have a scenario where you have to correct first. And I think often we get it wrong, even as parents, or I certainly get it wrong as a parent. When you're wanting to correct, we then forget about, after that correction, we forget about the connection again. And that has been a massive lesson, is that when you are speaking to somebody maybe a little bit more aggressively in trying to get your point across, never forget about the connection, the softer skill around that, post that discussion. And that has been one of the biggest lessons for me in the relationships. I hope that helps.
Josh, I think that's an awesome answer. And I just want to add just the last thing is just remember, as a coach, it is your job to facilitate a dream for that player. And ultimately that dream might take him out of whatever tough position he might be in, whatever his background, whatever his race, whatever his upbringing. It gives him an opportunity to achieve something in life and actually maybe achieve something for his whole family. So you're a facilitator of that dream. So don't forget how important your role is in that. Guys, we're getting some fantastic replies here on the side from Paul. Thank you very much. Really look forward to having you guys join us in the next couple of webinars. And I think the idea of the other webinars is they might interlink quite a bit with a lot of the stuff we're talking about, but actually there's various other topics that go into coaching, not just performance planning. And I'm really looking forward to getting into the nuts and bolts of those with all of you too. So please, if there's any other questions, please write them down here on the side. And it's been good to converse, and a hell of a good answer there, JP.
Thanks, man. I think there's another one aimed at me there. What coaches manage to get the best out of you and why? What sort of characteristics help develop your game and further? I almost answered that already in the previous question, connection and correction. The best coaches that I've worked with really took an interest in me as a person beyond the performance. So whether there was a performance or not, the connection was always sound. And because of that relationship was based on trust, they then had the freedom to speak aggressively if needed, or directly, rather is probably a better word. But the relationship was the most important for me, and I will continue to emphasize that in many conversations going forward, how important that relationship is.
Just going to make a reference to Peter van Rooyen's question. And Peter,
Sure.
it's good to see you on the platform. He says cheese, which is, for many of you who don't know, that's my nickname for obvious reasons. How do you think maybe the Indian team's planning might have changed? And I'm not going to go through the whole question, but I think the important thing and the thing to maybe make relevance to is it was a young Indian team that came out. And don't ever underestimate how a young player can sometimes come in and play without fear of failure. And quite often, as you become more and more involved in a setup or a series, whatever, quite often your thoughts might be going to that fear of failure that JP spoke about. And maybe your more experienced player might sometimes be thinking about what's going to go wrong rather than what's going to go right. And to bring in a new, refreshed energy sometimes, I just look at the way Pump played today and actually took the game away from the Aussies, but in a very mature fashion, to give him credit, and a hell of a test makes innings. So that, for me, is mentally they were strong. They've also got a fantastic setup, the Indian setup. And I think don't underestimate how important their depth analysis is. And this hasn't just happened this year. It's been a plan that's been in process probably for the last 10 years in Indian cricket. JP, you've been involved in the IPL. You know those players are under pressure every single game in that environment. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that ties into the next question about fear of failure, nerves for young kids, and how do you keep them moving on to the next level? Sorry, no, that's a different question. What do you guys think of the mental part of the game is actually a massive part of a player's skill set, and in particularly in dealing with younger players? And I think that the conversation for me is so important. And I made mention of that freedom to fail. And if your conversation with them is consistent like that, I think they will pick up that it's okay to get things wrong, to be able to learn and get better. And that for me is a crucial part, even at a young age. That, if you think about young kids, even however young, 5, 6, 7, if they know it's okay to get things wrong in their process of getting things better, and you're consistent with your behaviors and your conversation with them, I think they will feel secure in being able to have a conversation, air their vulnerabilities, air their fears. Because as we know, in a young man's society, talking about you fearing something is a scary thing, because it's all about showing bravado. No, nothing gets me. I even see it in my 5-year-old wanting to have a deep conversation with her. She doesn't want to go there because she feels like she needs to be strong. And if I'm consistent in my behaviors and conversations with her, she will find that trust. And I think it's very similar for young kids growing up.
We're going to take one final question from Savage. And Savage, you ask a very good question. His question is, how do you keep those fringe players in the team fully engaged and driven to be able to perform when they get the call? I'm going to come of it firstly from a coaching point of view. And JP, if you've got anything to add, please come at the end again.
Sure.
From a coaching point of view, some of the best advice I ever had from a coach, he asked me the question, Shane, what are you giving me that someone else isn't giving me in this team? So what skill set are you bringing me? Are you bringing me attitude? Are you a great fielder? What's your package? And I walked away from that meeting and I was the guy who was maybe blaming the system for not getting selected, rather than actually looking into myself to saying, what am I really giving? And I walked away from that meeting and I identified a certain skill set that I needed to work on that would ultimately force them to select me in the team. And the thing I really identified at that time was, I want to become the best death bowler that this team has. And I knew that every team requires a death bowler. So I went and worked on my skills and I made sure that I honed those skills. And a year later, I became a bigger part of the team. It was far easier to select me than it was to leave me out. And there's obviously a lot of other things you had to work on. But I think from that specific coach at that time posed a very good question to me. So he kept me engaged in a different way, even though I wasn't getting in the team. Because sometimes the hardest thing to do is you don't want to be the best 12th man. You've obviously heard that saying where, but then again, you want to be a very good 12th man because you want to show that you're a good team man. So staying engaged in the process is important, but identifying skills that you can work on, which will ultimately make you selectable in that team is crucial.
No, I think that's spot on, Shane. So just to try and answer everyone's question, I know we're running out of time, but I'll just try and answer it quickly. And maybe I see there's one pointed at you, Shane, for the last one. How important is integrating your support staff into individual team planning process? And you can see the question there. I think that is an important part of leadership. And in my playing experience, some of the best leaders are leaders that are comfortable in their own skin. And why they are comfortable is they are comfortable with delegating certain responsibilities to their support staff. So as an example, if you're a head coach and you have a fitness trainer, you don't have to trample over his domain in terms of what he needs to do. Allow him the process to facilitate that and give him the backing to know that his decisions are important and I'm going to back his decisions. But there's always a constant communication. So in terms of the coach, yes, leading conversations and leading the process, but you're allowing your support staff the delegation process to be able to feel part of it and feeling inclusive in that holistic development process.
Definitely, and it's about empowering people, empowering your support staff, allowing them to also make decisions. It's not a dictatorship. Ultimately, you will be defined by your support staff, how good you are as a head coach, because they make you look good or bad. And it's about what sort of, again, conversations you can facilitate to really empower that support staff. The last one I'll quickly answer is Paul's.
Okay, Shane, we're going to have to make this the last one. We are incredibly far over time. So I know there's some awesome questions coming through, guys, and I know you want to answer all of them and speak to everybody individually. But we have to just keep an eye on the time because I've got also my little announcement that I want to do at the end here, which I wanted to tell everybody about that I've managed to convince the two of you to do.
Fantastic. All right, so I'm going to answer it very quickly, Mikey. All right, so Paul asks, Shane, how much input have you had in from a junior point of view? Have you looked to create change so that there's a seamless transition? Paul, the best way to answer that question is yes, we have had input. As a coaching unit, we speak a lot about the pipeline and what that transition looks like for players going through the age group levels. Our under 19s we now have a performance academy in place. So that transition from school leavers into an academy, into a Scotland A team, into a national team has become far more and of an easier transition, let's say. And we also have fantastic coaches within our pipeline system, which is ultimately pushing that philosophy right through the system. So we're in constant communication with those coaches, and hopefully, we'll only see the fruits of that probably in the next few years because it takes a bit of time. But good systems in place with good coaches and good players ultimately might bring or will bring good results. So we have looked into it. Mikey, all over to you. I think JP and I have spoken enough.
Cool. Thanks, guys. Once again, that was awesome. Great questions coming through. Great. And some nice answers. Thanks, guys. So, like I said, I've got a very cool little announcement to make. I've managed to twist Shane and JP's arms to go beyond just this webinar series. So whilst they've been preparing for this and putting it all together, we've been sort of putting some other things together. And I'm going to sort of share a little tab so you guys can see that there are some other things as well on offer beyond this webinar series. So let me know. Can you see my screen there, Shane?
Yes, it's just busy loading, but I can see it, yes. Sorry,
so it might be a little bit slow with the internet connection. Just let me know if it lags behind. Okay. Right. So, guys, these two gentlemen, legends of the game, and as you can hear, incredibly insightful and knowledgeable, have agreed to put together 3 wonderful offers for you guys. That's actually a typo. It should be 3. Sorry, not 5. 3 1-hour exclusive calls, literally just covering this topic. As Shane and JP said earlier, they can go on and on and on and on about this topic forever. So they are offering it's a group call where there's only going to be 10 seats, limited 10 seats. It's going to be a Zoom call. And the two of them are going to go way into in-depth with these. So it's going to be another 3-hour discussion, basically just covering performance planning. When I asked them to talk about it, they said that they could go on and on about this for days. So yeah, I then convinced them to talk about it. Okay, let's offer this to these people. We can't do it all in a webinar series, otherwise we will be here forever if we have to go through all these topics. So if you're interested, that's the website there. You can see at the bottom, jp21coaching.com/performance planning offers, and you can register for that. Now, normally, being able to converse with these two type of guys would cost you at least 500 Rand an hour, but because this is our launch and because you're on the call, you guys get it for 250 Rand per hour, those 3 calls. So it's an absolute bargain. They're giving 50% off for their time and their value in order to go on a little bit longer with you guys in much more detail than what they already have been doing. Okay, offer number 2, right? This is a 1-hour private personal call with these two guys, okay, discussing performance planning and any other area that you guys might need help. They've only got time for 3 slots, okay? So a normal price for a one-on-one call time with these guys for 2 hours would literally cost you 2 grand an hour. Okay, so it would normally be 4 grand for both 2 hours. And again, because this is our launch and because we are just offering this to the people that are on this call and on this call only, we're going to be giving it to you guys at 1,600 for 2 hours. That is 800 Rand an hour. That is like 60% off. Again, visit that website at the bottom. Write it down now. jp21coaching.com/performance planning offers to register. Seats are very limited, 3 spots only for that. Then this is the big guy. This is the awesome offer. This is the magical one, I think. It is all about a mentorship mindset group. Okay, so in offer number 3, you get the private call as well. So you'll have your own one-on-one phone call with JP and Shane for that 2 hours, and then you become also a part of the mentorship mastermind group. Sorry, right? There are only 5 places around for this. This is basically having Shane and JP as your personal mentors for a whole year. Okay. Imagine being able to talk to these guys and click in with them every quarter. So 4 times a year, you'll be able to link in with these guys, and not just them, but also the other 5 people within the group. And you guys together will be able to discuss what you should be doing with your team at that stage of the year, how you should be moving forward. They've got a whole plan of what should be happening going forward, and in those sessions over the year, topics to discuss, things that haven't been discussed in these webinar series. And that'll be obviously a very small group, just 5 of you with the 2 of these legends taking it forward. So normally it costs 40 grand to have a proper mentor, especially of these guys' caliber. Okay, we're talking 40 grand. That's how much it would cost you. And I know I looked into it personally as well, to have my own business mentor. And it was just a little bit more than that, and it was only going to be 20-minute calls, 1 20-minute call a month. So no, these guys are offering a lot more. But again, because this is our launch week and because you guys are on this call, we are offering it at 15 grand. That's absolutely nothing. It's a complete giveaway. I think that is gold. It's an annual membership. Being able to zone in and have these 2 guys as your mentors, I think they are they're excited about it. It did take a little bit of convincing, but looking at their schedules, they managed to fit it in. And I really think that this is of huge value to you guys. So if we look at them side by side, there's the corrected slide. 3 times 1 hour group calls in offer number 1. Okay, that's 750 Rand for all 3 sessions, covering performance planning. Okay, offer number 2 is a 1 hour private personal call, 2 hours, 1 times 2 hour private call, also covering performance planning. And then if that gets finished, you guys can discuss anything else that you want. Again, there's only 3 slots available for that at 1,600 Rand. The final offer, okay, which to me is where all the value really does lie, in terms of longevity and the long-term goal for your cricketing coaching career, and we're looking at 15,000 Rand. That's for everything in offer number 2 plus offer number 3 being a part of that annual membership, guys. This is only going to be available this week, okay? And but seats, as you can see, seats are very limited. Okay, 10 for offer number 1, 3 for offer number 2, and 5 for offer number 3. Okay, so please write down that website one last time, jp21coaching.com/performance planning offers. You go there and you will see offer 1, 2, and 3. You click on whichever one is most relevant to you, which one you are most interested in, and you can take it from there. Otherwise, gents, I'm going to wrap it up from there. I'll give it back to JP and Shane just to say one final goodbye. But yeah, thank you from my side. Thank you very much for joining. Thank you very much for the time. I know it took a lot longer than what we had hoped as well, but I think yeah, we can't complain with the amount of value that these two guys have given us today. So thank you very much for joining, and hopefully we'll see you guys all again tomorrow.
I'm gonna allow JP just to have the last little knock, because I just say he's gonna be right at the end finishing the game for us. So you're gonna score the winning runs for us, JP. Just from my side, guys, thank you very, very much for joining. And it's not going to be a goodbye from me, because we're going to see you all tomorrow again, and the next day and the next day. So it's not a goodbye. Just have a good evening, and we'll see you guys tomorrow. Japes, over to you.
Yeah, 1 of 1 needed. So just tapping it to the leg side to get the winning runs. But just appreciate your time, guys. Thank you very much for tuning in, and look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Take care.